Thank you all for making the time to be with us for this WRAP meeting, this meeting of the United Policyholders Wildfire Risk Reduction and Asset Protection Working Group. If you have been coming to these meetings, I think this is about our 53rd or 54th since the insurance crisis began to really deepen in California. And we decided to take a very proactive approach to helping people navigate the situation and then also to bring solutions to the affordability and availability problems, as well as capture all the scientific awareness and the increased knowledge that is now out there for us about the things that one can do to reduce the chances of one's property being damaged or destroyed in a wildfire, what those things are, who can do them for you, how much they cost, and then which insurers are getting on the bandwagon to reward people who are taking those steps. So if you've been with us on this journey, it's been really interesting to see how much progress we're making on some fronts, but how many challenges remain. I had a wonderful meeting this morning with a executive with the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety, Alistair Watt. He's been on some of our calls, but because I was with Roy Wright last week, who's the head of IBHS, at a conference on insuring the future, and we managed to get some time together. I had the opportunity to catch up on where they are, where IBHS is with their inspection program and their certification program, and then their plans for expanding into other states. So we talked this morning about the fact that they probably will soon be active in Colorado, which is good news for Colorado residents and for United Policyholders. We do have a staff person there. We have some preparedness funding there in Colorado as well. So we're taking a lot of what we've been doing here in California and then sharing it with folks in Colorado so that they can skip some of the harder parts and maybe get to the parts that are more worked out, such as the very, very clear standards that are now in place for what will constitute a risk-reduced home, what will constitute a risk-reduced community, and all that. So at our next WRAP meeting, I'm kind of jumping ahead on our agenda, but just to have everybody, while you're all still here at the beginning of the meeting, our next meeting will be November 4th. Same back channel, 1 o'clock. And we already have our 2 speakers lined up for that. So just to kind of look forward to that, we will be hearing from Ann Cope, who is the lead engineer with IBHS. We've heard from her a little bit before, but we're going to be digging deep on trees and how does IBHS see trees that are in the 30 feet as opposed to just the 5 feet, zone 0. We're also going to be hearing from Catherine Rogers with Durabon Fencing. My amazing colleague, Emily Rogan, has been beating the bushes to find the vendors that are leading the way with metal gates and giving a nod to Joe Loucher, also on the United Policyholders staff. He is one of the early people who identified, well, gosh, it's really, we get it, that experts are telling us don't have a wooden fence touching the house, that it's kind of like a wick that just could lead flames right to the house. But where does one find a metal gate or metal fencing that's not hideous and a portion of a fence that can be attached, and who even makes that? So we'll be hearing from somebody who makes that on November 4th, along with for those of you who have been listening to your neighbors or maybe yourself or maybe me at previous meetings. One of the challenges that we are all grappling with getting people to comply with what is going to be the hard and fast law in California starting soon, that the first 5 feet around your home, if you're in the WUI, needs to be clear. And the fact that we love trees and trees bring shade and trees are beautiful. They also help cool our homes. So we'll be looking to hear from Anne on where the IBHS is on that that topic. It's been a topic for a lot of you, I know, especially in areas where there's protected trees by law and all that. Okay, so I probably skipped the part about me being Amy Bach and the architect of this endeavor, but I think you probably all know that by now. So welcome. We're going to dig in today to two topics. We're going to be talking about what insurance-related pieces of legislation did and didn't make it through the legislature. The legislature recessed in September, and a number of bills have already been signed, and a lot of them are waiting for the governor's signature. There may be a number of you who have weighed in. We have been weighing in to encourage Governor Newsom to sign the bills that we supported. We supported quite a number of bills this session in California, including the bill to create a public model for rating purposes, for pricing purposes, so that when the DOI is reviewing rate filings that are based on catastrophe models, that they will have a public model to serve as a benchmark, to serve as a measuring stick against whatever the modeler that insurance company that's requesting the rate increase, whatever company they hired, what are they saying in their model about the future and how much money the insurer needs to be charging in order to be prepared for that future. This public model is going to give the Department of Insurance another tool we feel that's very important. And it's the public model. Developing a public model is something that United Policyholders initiated. We initiated that conversation because we, many years ago, because we know that Florida has that tool. And I think I've shared with this group before that the head of the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation answered me directly when I said, how's that public model helping your agency when you're reviewing rate filings? And he said it's very helpful. And they're even kind of building a related tool for reinsurance projections. So we're going to hear from somebody today who served on the advisory committee that the commissioner created to say, should we have a public model in California? The answer is yes. It costs money. So a bill was introduced to pay to create the model. And one of my colleagues on that working group is one of our speakers today, Michael Gollner. So I want to start by inviting Claudia to join us. Claudia Mildner with the Department of Insurance. We have known each other for a long time. She is now the Assistant Chief Deputy Legislative Director. And Claudia, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Nice to see you. Thank you. So how did the legislative session go for us insurance consumers?
Honestly, I think once I'm going to say it this way. Once things get signed, I think it went great. So, hello everyone. I'm Claudia Mildner, Assistant Chief Deputy Legislative Director here in the Ledge office with CDI. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. It was one heck of a session. I don't know if anybody watched the end of session. That was a big rush to the end. Lots of last minute stuff submitted on the floor. Always exciting. There were a number of bills that are still left behind that are 2-year bills that could have some major impacts for next year. I just want to caveat with that because it feels a little lighter. The ones we got to hit the governor's desk, I will say now, just to kind of lead in, I feel that they're very impactful. I feel like they can make a difference, and I feel like the department was behind and sponsored on most of them, on a lot of the big ticket items this year. So I'm really proud to have those, and I'm really looking forward to them getting signed. And I will jump in. Now, I do have a long list, so I do want to caveat this with, I'm happy to answer any questions on our sponsored bills. I don't really have answers on our non-sponsored. I brought mostly a short list of those because there are a number of items that I don't think people think are related to wildfire that for us are not separate, like the mortgage forbearance for the LA fires, anything that has to do with Fair Plan. That wasn't the initially why Fair Plan was made, but it is essentially for wildfire now. So anytime Fair Plan comes up for us, it is always related to wildfire.
Okay.
So to keep that in mind, of some of these may seem like they're kind of out in the boonies, but in our umbrella, they're all still very much related to the work that we're doing here at the department. So that said, I'm happy to go into the list of our sponsored bills that are enrolled that are still waiting for signature. There's quite a few of them. And I'm happy to answer any questions on these because I've been living and breathing them for 10 months now. I would say probably the biggest one is Senate Bill 429. That's the Cortese bill. That's the one that allows us to do the public cat model. And it's going to, and the reason it is because we did need funding. That's the one that's based off of the research group who created this great, there's a whole recommendation document that's on our website if anybody wants to go look it up. It has all of the recommendations from the work group. I do recommend looking at it because it is going to guide what we want to do with Senate Bill 429 pretty heavily. A lot of the work, a lot of the research has already been done, and the funding is to actually pursue partnerships to create what these models will look like, using that as the big solid foundation for the work that's already been done. So that report is on our website. I do not have the name of it. It's related to the cat model. That's not much about cat modeling on our website. It should be pretty searchable.
Yep. Thank you.
One of the other big ones.
So I'm sorry, Claudia,
Go ahead.
signed, not signed yet?
Not signed. None of our bills for wildfire
okay.
have been signed.
Okay. Okay.
They're all enrolled. They're all sitting on the governor's desk still. We don't
so
even
not
have
too late for people to, not too late for people to write
Correct.
in. Okay,
yes.
well, that's good to know. And if I can multitask while Claudia's talking, I will find the website that makes it very easy for you to figure out how you write to the governor to communicate with him on a bill. But okay, go ahead, Claudia, back to you.
Sure. So let's see. The big ones, I think we have Assembly Bill 888. That was a Calderon bill. It is the grant program within the department for fire safe roofing, fire safe actions within 5 feet of the structure for zone 0, primarily that fire safe roof, covering all or part of the costs. It's trying to establish a brand new grant program within the Department of Insurance. Now, we don't typically have grants that are our own, but this one is one that the commissioner really feels can make an impact. This is one that Alabama and Louisiana have had a program like this for over 10 years. And it has gone from underfunded in those states to millions of dollars in funding because because it's been around for over 10 years, they have reports. They can actually see how much money insurers are saving by making these changes. So the insured's saving money. Everybody's saving money. The houses aren't as damaged. Like it's actually making an impact. And that's why we wanted to bring that project here. That's why the commissioner wanted to have that same grant program here that these other states have. The fact that it has this long historical background in these other 2 states, that it's not related to fire in those other 2 states, but it's the same concept because we're replacing the roof for the same. It's almost identical what we're trying to do. All of the data that shows that people are saving money, that this is protecting homes, the reports just came out, and one of them just came out, I think, in February. And so those have been really helpful to tell us that this is the right approach. Now, this one did also require funding, so we have to, almost most of our bills required funding this year. So they're all sitting on the governor's desk still, which is good, but they did require funding, and 429 is one of the biggest ones. 888 is one of our biggest ones. There's a couple others that are going to have that big impact that we're trying to look for as well.
Claudia, how about the no list bill, Ben Allen? It's no longer the no list bill. Was it the
The
one that
reduced list, Bill,
the
yes.
reduced oh you've changed it with we've changed the name. For is it 495?
Yes, Senate Bill 495, that's the Ben Allen bill. It was going to be an eliminate the list bill, and now it's 60% of contents coverage limits.
But
And
are
that
you
was,
expecting,
well,
do you have any tea leaves here on whether it'll be signed?
the 60% got us away from opposition. So we're hopeful that it will be signed. It's also very similar to, I think it's Washington State, one of the other states that has
Colorado. Yeah,
Colorado.
Colorado.
There,
Yeah.
there's a couple of other states that are very close to it. So we went that route to try to say, there's a basis for these percentages that are actually being used, not just throwing a dart at the wall and aiming for a percentage.
Right.
We're very hopeful. Anytime we can get rid of opposition, our options are better. It's just sometimes we can't get rid of all of the opposition. And on 495, it doesn't mean we got support. It just
Right.
means we got rid of opposition because there's no support from industry really on this bill.
Yeah.
But yeah, Senate Bill 495, I think we're still hopeful based on the amendments that were made.
Okay. So
There
you're
hasn't
you're
been
not going to
consent.
be showing slides, right?
No, I do not have any
Okay.
slides on this, short of
That's
just telling
fine.
you what the bill number is.
Well, will it mess you up if I share my screen? Because
Not at all.
we
No,
have
go right
the,
ahead.
I have just the bills that UP weighed in on. I don't have all of your bills. So if it's going to mess up your order,
No, I have
um,
in no order here whatsoever. I'm trying to
okay.
hit some of the major ones that I know folks have been asking about.
Right, right, great. Okay. All right. So, uh, we started here with 365, the non-renewal moratorium. It didn't look like that one moved. Is that a 2-year bill?
365, that's not one of ours.
This, okay, it is
And I
gonna,
don't have it on my list. So
okay,
my
never
guess is
mind. I'm gonna, I'll just let you go through your list. I thought that was yours, that said that businesses now get protection from the non-renewal moratorium.
the moratorium should be 547.
Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, Senate Bill 547
Oh, so
is
it must have been two. Okay. So 547.
547 is the commercial moratorium. We worked really hard with industry to get support on that one and managed to land it. So my hopes on this bill, 547 was a personal project of mine. I am very optimistic because there should not be any reason. There was no opposition to this bill by the time that we got it through.
Okay.
And the only change I think that really happened is there's there's a limit to it.
Hmm.
We didn't want to. We're not here to support Walmart. We're here to support the mom and pop stores. We're here to
Right.
support nonprofits and food banks and the things that are in the community. And
Yeah.
so there was a limit placed on it for that reason. And a lot of that was discussion with the industry of what does that limit look like? What commercial industries are you insuring? And would this cover the majority of them still if it was under a certain amount?
Gotcha.
So that one, I'm really hopeful. That I don't think there's any reason it shouldn't be.
Okay.
Again, we got support, so I'm really optimistic about 547.
Okay.
616, because it's on screen here. 616 is the Home Hardening Commission. Again, that was one. 616 was a doozy. Everybody and their mother wanted their fingers in the cookie jar on 616 because it brings everybody together in a room and has them talk about what wildfire, home hardening, mitigation, risk reduction, what all of that is. And then everybody
Hmm.
has to kind of agree and work towards making their requirements the same. And right now, the requirements are scattered. Everybody and their mother has a different recommendation for what counts as risk mitigation. So right up until the end, 616 was being amended to add and remove people, to shuffle the council around, and who is going to be on the actual commission, who was going to be the advisory committee. Right up until the very end, they were amending that. I think there was only one group that still remained opposed unless amended. Otherwise, they established everybody was good, was on board. And for 616, it was the water folks. They didn't feel like they should have been included in the bill. But I think everyone else thought that water should be included because that was a problem in Los Angeles. They had
Yeah.
water issues. So it was very much at the forefront of everyone's mind. So I'm really hopeful in 616. Again, a lot of this work was done. A lot of
Sorry.
agreement was found, and all of the opposition, but that one should have been gone. So
Okay.
I'm pretty sure 616 is on its way.
Okay. Was it helping you, or should I stopped sharing because I thought I might be
It's up
knocking
to you.
you
It's
off
up to
your.
you. I will.
Right.
I will answer whatever one of the bills. These are all of our sponsors. I'm just like I said.
Right.
These are all still active. We have a lot of sponsored bills that are enrolled and still waiting on his desk. I think
Okay.
we're all assuming he's going to sign them all in kind of bulk in
Once.
like a wildfire presentation,
Right.
like he's done with the
Right.
last couple groups.
Right.
But don't know yet. We
Okay.
have not heard whispers negatively about any of our wildfire bills.
All right. So 616 to establish a community hardening commission and make people talk to each other got through, and it's on his desk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Assembly Bill 1, this one is so simple. It just wants us to look at whether or not we should review our Safer from Wildfires every 5 years. That's really all that AB1 is asking us to do. Now, the issue there is that it's expensive.
Right.
And for us, it's expensive for us, but it's something that we should do. It's something that we want to do. It's something that we would do on our own, even without the bill. But having the legislation in place, having the statute in place is good. It's just good policy. Now, I do know that Department of Finance doesn't like it because they're concerned over how much it costs us. It's easily over $1 million out of the insurance fund.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're not concerned about that, we don't see that as being a concern because we have the funding for it. It's only every 5 years.
Right.
Department of Finance was concerned. So
Did IBHS weigh in? Did they take a position? Do you remember?
not that I know of. If they did, I don't have the letter for it.
Okay. Okay.
But I do know that, especially for this one, there's a lot of support from just not so less the insurance industry, but I think a lot of them are also in support, but more the developers, the folks that make like rock wool, the folks that make the fire resistant fencing. A lot of those companies are on board for support on this bill, which is fantastic.
Okay.
It really comes down to how is the governor going to weigh the financial concern from Department of Finance?
Right.
And this is the second time we've tried to move this one. It's the first time we've been the sponsor of it. It's just good policy to have it in statute, to have it. So, and it's not a mandate.
Right.
It's a recommendation.
Okay. All right.
226. Oh, 226. I have personally rewritten the entirety of this bill 3 times since last year when it was introduced as a different bill. This bill is finally in a spot that Fair Plan says they can use it, that iBank says they're okay with it, that everyone was on board to just move it forward. Now, the primary purpose of it is a line of credit. Bonds are also in there.
Oh, this is the iBank. Okay, so this is good. This is right. This is good.
It's a line of credit for Fair Plan. It allows them to take out loans. Now, everything has to still be approved by the commissioner because they can't move money at all without the commissioner giving approval for the most part. So it allows, with commissioner authority, to request loans and to take out a line of credit. There are also bonds in there. Those are more longer term. The line of credit is more immediate short term. And so the bill by itself sets up financial security for Fair Plan in both short and long term. And it gives them that resource.
And just for those of you who might be on the Fair Plan, or the people in your community are having to be on the Fair Plan, some other insurers of last resort, like the California Earthquake Authority, which shares with the FAIR Plan, take all comers, meaning if you apply, they have to offer you a policy, have experimented with different ways of maintaining their financial strength. And what one thing that the CEA did to try to balance not having to raise their prices as much as as indicators said that they should, they started selling catastrophe bonds as a way of shoring up their fiscal strength. The FAIR Plan can't do that because they're not an entity, they're an association. So they have to use this iBank, which is a special entity that was set up in California, I think for workers' comp originally. So that this bill, again, the more we can shore up the FAIR Plan, given what they're holding now in terms of risk, the better. So you said this one did move the
Yes.
226? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
226 is on his desk. It got,
Okay,
everybody was on board for it by the time we got to the final language.
got it. Okay,
232 unfortunately died this year.
okay,
It is, I don't believe it's a 2-year. I think it actually just stalled out. That
okay,
doesn't mean that it won't come back at some point, because I know that these accounts are more common in other states. I think it was just a selling point, and figuring out how to make it work with the banks
yeah,
was a really tough point on that one.
okay. All right.
290 is not ours, but
Mhm.
we were involved with the writing of it, because we had to be. It's a very, very simple bill. All it does is make it so you can pay your FAIR Plan stuff online.
Yeah,
And that's really all it
that's
does.
it.
It's still
Okay,
good. It's still moving.
okay. All right. I'm going to move past two that are not really on point.
I talked about 888. 888 is kind of our flagship this year because we think we can make a lot of difference with it. 931 is not ours. 1236, that one is a 2-year bill.
Okay.
And I know they tried to run it last year. Most of the hiccup on that one is funding. And I think there is a way to, I think we're still going to try for it because it's in a 2-year bill. I think we're still going to push for it for next year. But funding was difficult this year because the Department of Insurance did get some funding in the budget. We just don't know yet. But all of our budget people have to sit down, they have to do the math on it, and all of that is still happening.
Okay. So no catastrophe savings accounts.
Hmm.
Were there other bills that relate to this group's focus, which is risk reduction and restored access to insurance?
Let me double check. Um, Assembly Bill 493 was a Harabedian bill that's been chaptered. That one is just when you're getting hazard insurance proceeds deposited on a mortgage, they put it in an interest-bearing account. That one I thought would be important just because it's apparently money that was being lost.
Yeah, no, that's a big one for us. Those were, and in fact, we have been encouraging people through our roadmap to recovery program to request interest and to fight for it. And we have publications to help people do that. But this will be great. That's great. And I think we helped get a similar bill through in Colorado. Okay, great. Yes.
There's kind of a crossover between health and wildfire, which we're starting to see more of in Assembly Bill 1003 was a Calderon bill. It's enrolled where it deals with air quality events, and it touches on smoke. And smoke has been kind of a hard one to tack down in bills the last few years. This is one of the first ones I know of that's gotten enrolled that talks about guidelines for counties in case of a significant air quality event and incorporating it into their public outreach and how they were going to set all that up. So it's not specific to wildfire, but that's what it was written about initially.
Okay.
Another one is Assembly Bill 1531. It adds CDI as a non-voting member, but it adds us to the JPA for the California Wildfire Mitigation Program Board. who have a number of grants that they oversee. So the CWMP oversees a multitude of grants. It's currently just OES and CAL FIRE, and they're adding CDI because they're already talking about insurance. We should be there.
Yeah.
You can't talk about wildfire without insurance. Maybe that'll change in the future. You're just hoping, but right now, unfortunately, those things are connected in everyone's conversations. It's a pretty short list aside from ours. Sponsored bills tend to hit the major points of wildfire this year. I think there were a couple that were stuck as 2-year bills. There's a multitude of report bills, like Senate Bill 326 was a Becker bill that's enrolled that will have CAL FIRE preparing risk mitigation planning frameworks, risk forecasting, and a mitigation scenario report with a private consultant. And they're going to have to do that. I think it's every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
There's 254 was the refunding of the wildfire fund, paid half by everyone and then half by the utilities to bolster the wildfire fund after the last fires. And 254 did a lot of other stuff, but that was our piece.
Okay.
254 was the big energy bill that he had that went in at like the very tail end of the session. 525, I think it was on your list. That's the FAIR Plan adding manufactured homes. That one is enrolled. It is on his desk.
Great.
Really hoping that one gets signed. If it doesn't, we have been in discussions internally on how do we do this without statute if for some reason the bill doesn't get signed. Still hoping it will. And it doesn't mandate that FAIR Plan has to provide replacement cost for manufactured homes. It just says they have to have it as an option. So if you have a manufactured home, you can pay the additional money to get full replacement coverage on your manufactured home, not just market value.
Okay.
That's a significant, I mean, it'll be a different cost difference, but that is significant because you have a lot of folks with manufactured homes that are maybe 5 to 7 years old and they get thousands, like it's a very small number because the fair market value depreciates that fast.
Yes, I don't mean to keep butting in and saying, well, UP did this and UP did that. But we have, we did a whole report on how subpar, the product choices are for, manufactured homes, and how outdated the industry's views are on that style of construction ever since they went from being mobile homes by a federal law to becoming manufactured homes in I think 1980. They're just a lot more robust. So anything that we can do to help stimulate better options, better coverage options for people. If we have to start with the FAIR Plan, it's something. But yeah, definitely is an area that needs help. Claudia, we have another speaker. So if there is not another wildfire related bill, we can say thank you so much. I appreciate my colleagues putting the information into the chat about how people can see all the bills and see the public model working group report that you referenced earlier. I cannot see, I don't, if any participant has put something in the chat, I don't see it.
If you have additional questions, feel free to email me. If you have support letters and don't know where to send them, feel free to email me your letters. Like I'm more than happy to be an active participant in that process. So like I said, even simple questions, feel free to shoot me an email.
Thanks. If you don't mind sharing I don't know if you have the ability to chat. If you want to just put your email address or read it out loud.
Sure, I will drop it in chat for everyone.
Great, thank you. Emily, I think it's a setting on my computer, unfortunately, this temporary computer that I'm using. Not a bill question. Okay. All right. We're going to move on. Claudia, thank you so much. I want to welcome our next speaker. Michael Gollner, as I referenced earlier, he and I served together on the committee that the California Insurance Commissioner created to look at the value of a model. He recently issued a report that got a lot of attention. He is a professor at UC Berkeley, and he's going to be summarizing the research paper that he recently published on fire risk to structures in California's WUI, Wildland-Urban Interface. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Amy. Um, so yeah, this talk really focuses around this paper. It was a report, a preprint, which we do before publication. We submitted it a couple days before the January wildfires, so it doesn't include LA because it was submitted before they happened. We did not have that foresight, but it was recently published in Nature Communications, and the focus of our work really was to see for mitigation matters, for surrounding all those different influences, what actually matters in terms of the risk to a structure. And so we tried to delve at that a couple different ways. And I'm going to try to demystify some of the results and do that here. Before I do that, I do want to mention that my laboratory here at Berkeley, we do a variety of different research projects. A lot of it focuses on the fire. So when they say, what part of wildfire do you work on? The fire. So the actual flames, the actual heat transfer, which means how that generates smoke, how it ignites buildings, even how flames spread in space. So we do a variety of different projects. We just completed a large series of tests with IBHS on structure-to-structure burns. We're working on some vegetative testing in California recently, think Zone Zero and those things. We look at embers and ignitions and fire emissions with CARB. And so we've really kind of spread the gamut. There's a lot of interest in these problems, but it's also really important. We do fire modeling as well. And I think connecting the experimental results to the modeling is a real benefit that we bring to try to bring that knowledge into the models. I was on that wildfire catastrophe modeling group with Amy. And as you know, there's a lot of unknowns. And I have to say, when it comes to having a public model, more than anything, having that information out, move some of it out of the black box to push industry to do better and better in their modeling, I think will be really beneficial. But we're trying to do that regardless. All our codes are open source, all our data. And so I'm going to start off with how wildfires get into a community and then talk about our results. So we often talk about pathways to fire spread. And everything used to come down to radiation. So going back to Jack Cohen's papers, we thought about radiation between homes, and people thought even radiation was responsible for most or all ignitions. And thanks in large part to Jack Cohen's research, we've seen that it is important for certain situations, like if you have a big flame next to a house or you have a house next to a house. But in many other situations, it's not, and there are other modes that we're worried with, such as direct flame contact. You can have a fire come up your fence and get into your home. It could be from a car to shrubs to house, mulch to fence to siding. There are many different pathways that can go along. And now we talk about connected pathways. And finally, embers or firebrands, right? These are the flying pieces. They're really difficult to model, really difficult to handle. And sometimes they ignite hours after landing. And the process is different between wildland and WUI. And so embers really complicate this. But we have to think of our measures for protection, assuming embers are going to be there, we're going to have the fire. What can we do to prevent each of these three pathways from occurring? And so there's really some different mitigation approaches. On the left, you see the main one we talk about around the house is defensible space. Move the fire away from the structure. That doesn't mean clear everything. That's why they talk about clearing close to the home. To prevent the small flames from getting there. And as you extend out, keeping things spread out so they can't propagate between. And any big flames like large stands of conifers, thinning them out so that they can't have large enough flames that could approach the house. On the other side, the structure itself can ignite. The small flames can get up to the structure. Also, you got litter. You can have embers deposit, embers through vents. The heat can melt windows. The siding can ignite. There are many different features. So You want to reduce the exposure, which the majority happens within your defensible space in the home ignition zone. And you want to harden the structure so that if little fires or little embers get there, it resists that ignition. I say, so that top graphic is from NIST and their work, they're like knobs and nothing brings it to zero risk. But if you start bringing most structures much lower risk, then on a community-wide scale, you're really reducing the risk across the whole community. So this is great. We know what to do. We know how to do it. But you can't do everything everywhere. Houses are too close together. Roof is expensive. Windows expensive. Defensible space, where do we do it? We really want numbers. We want to actually study how effective are these things in different places and how are they interrelated. And so this study is interesting where we took a data-driven approach. So we know we want mitigation to be applied, but we need these methods to relate the feature and exposure to losses. Now, previous analyses have been done, but there's not a lot of quantitative data ranking one measure for mitigation versus another. So there have been studies on a single fire or small pieces, but never through many fires at a large scale, taking into account all the factors. And a lot of the analysis, maybe one or two didn't, but the majority of them used linear correlations or statistics. So it said, well, this was important, but it didn't account for the fact that this house had a massive flame and that house had a little flame. And of course, that's going to change the outcome. And of course, when we talk about the little flame, we talk about exposure data. No previous studies used fire and ember exposure from wildland to structures or from structures to structures. And those are all things that we incorporated in this work. So we had to build a big data set. As I said, it's data-driven. So we used the damage inspection or DINS data set, which is our ground truth. This is firefighters right after the fire, taking pictures, marching around, seeing what burned down, and importantly, taking pictures and documenting what didn't burn down as well, so that we have a comparison of why did one versus the other burn down. I caution it's not like some NIST had and now UL FSRI are doing these post-event studies where they really carefully interview. The DINS data is not of that quality, but it's massive. Unfortunately, tens and tens of thousands of structures. So this gives us a wide data set in many different areas so that we can look at a population level statistics. So we quantified the significance of different WUI features on destruction. We did this SHAP approach, which is like a game theory approach, but basically it's a ranking. Which one was most important in a model? And then I'm going to talk about, we actually took that and said, what could we have done? What would be the effect of different measures? And I think that really, at the end, nails and shows us how effective these measures could be. So you'll see the 5 fires we focused on. We did this because we had to model the fire. That takes time, so we had to focus on individual fires. We wanted a lot of destroyed homes. We wanted different types of fires with different weather driving, different fuels, different community layouts, and that we accomplished that. So this is just a visual display of the DINS database. We have looked at the entirety of the DINS database, but we're only presenting on the 5 fires here because that has the modeled and also lots of additional data we put in. So what did we put? Where do we get the data from? Well, we had this damage inspection. It shows the roof, the siding, windows, vent, eaves, decking, all that information and the year built. We had to fill in missing pieces like defensible space. Sonoma County had this great LiDAR, which filled in many gaps. So that actually has like a height sense of where vegetation is. We use that to supplement a lot of the data. And we also then had to use aerial and street view imagery to go additionally to see, is there vegetation? Now, for defensible space, we're only looking at vegetation for that, and it's up to 1 meter resolution. So we can get to that 5-foot zone, but we can't get super fine. We can't see if there's mulch or something like that. Structure separation, we calculated based on where every home is, the separation to the nearest homes. We also remodeled these fires. I'll talk about, we have a new model, which models wildland and WUI fires. So we remodeled these fires and then saw what was the flame exposure, what was the ember exposure in the reconstruction. It's an estimate. because you never know what really happened on the ground. No one was there to take measurements. These were all life safety disasters. However, it gives us a great idea of this house on the hill with high brush probably got way more exposure than this house in the middle of the community. And so that gives us additional data and undamaged structures. The newer data was very good about undamaged structure. The older data, not as much. Luckily, the older structures survived, so we could backtrack and find their most recent. And for the majority of the structures, we could get the information. For that data that we didn't have, we had to do convolution and other data science methods to fill in. So like if we don't know this home's year built, we can assume it's probably similar to the ones around because all the ones around have similar year builds. And then of course, we do some ground truth to all this. So the defensible space, as I mentioned, was one of the hardest parts. And you can just see an example on the left and the right versus zone 0 and 1 being clear and it not being clear. You can never get perfect resolution without doing a ground inspection. And there's really no perfect ground inspections prior to fires in that. We are using CAL FIRE's inspection database in LA, but there's still a lot of gaps to really get to that data. But this gives us a good broad idea. Is there vegetation? And let's see if it has an impact. And so you can just visually see where that vegetation is mapped and the kind of fine resolution we're doing in that defensible space on the right to the left. And you can also see how we map the structure location there. And so we use that structure location to look at the distance between structures.
I'm sorry, Michael, can you just help me make sure if I get it, maybe other people will also, or they might get it.
Yeah.
So what you're showing here, you're showing the unburned structures, and then you overlay the vegetation.
These are all structures. So when we're doing the base map, this is the pre-fire condition, and we're trying to get the layout. So these are where the boundary of each physical structure was. And then we're also adding in vegetation. So LiDAR allows us to get not just a color, but also the height of the vegetation so that we can see if there is a lot of material in the defensible space in different zones around the structures.
Okay.
We also use where that structure is to calculate the distance to the nearest structure to see if the distance makes a difference.
Okay, and did Bill Tyler with Fire Safe Marin's asking, did the structured separation include separation to sheds, trellises, and other small built items?
We did it to any structures that are basically included in Microsoft. So there are two primary buildings. We don't do a lot to outbuildings. We didn't focus on that. It's too difficult to distinguish for mostly these older fires.
Okay, thank you. And folks on the call, if you do have questions for Michael, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I can see it now. Thanks. Keep going, Michael. Thank you.
So we also added this fire modeling, and currently there are lots of fire models where you recreate fires, you can predict future fires. The problem is if you're modeling wildland-urban interface, this is the campfire on a current model. It's all marked as unburnable. And so current models struggle, and this goes for some of the insurance models, but not all, struggle when they reach an urban area and wouldn't propagate the fire as it reaches a city. And so that's another development, and not the focus of this work, but something that we did use, is that we can model that fire within that. And so you can see for the campfire, the structures that were destroyed and how the model predicts the fire moving through. Now, models aren't perfect. You can see that we do have that northerly progression of the fire in the model that is always predicted. Something happened with the winds, or something happened that was different from the inputs that we actually gather into the model. However, it still gives us a very good sort of coarse local estimate of what the fire exposure may have been to different structures. And we try to statistically characterize this to get the best match possible. So what we're going to do is we take all this data, put it together, and we try to do some interrelated methods. So how do we predict which structure? It's not just a correlation. What if we put, well, this structure next to that structure with this, but not this, but what about the neighbors? And you can use machine learning to do that. It's essentially, regression and classification methods. We have to clean the data so that it's something that it can process cleanly. but we look for those relationships using a machine learning algorithm. And that machine learning algorithm, there's a variety of ones we use. I am not going to get into the details on this talk, but we essentially look at them and test them and pick the best one that gives us the most accurate results. And so in this case, we're using something called XGBoost. It's a gradient boosting technique. It's sort of the methodology of building this machine learning model. But all we're really doing is we're building the set of mathematical equations that fit all of the data that we gave it best. And what I'm going to show you is not the output of that model, but we do something called SHAP, which is to run the model and look at which parameter is most important, which one that you change has the biggest impact. And this is the result. All those 5 fires put together, the separation between structures has the biggest impact. This is not a surprise for those of us that understand WUI fires, and for those of us who look at WUI fires in California. All the losses, or I would say a vast majority of the losses, are in these very large destructive fires. And so that has to be where homes are close together. There are isolated ones that are in rural areas, but most have clumpings of structures, and it's the most predictive factor. Now, the other fact is, if you didn't have other factors, structure separation alone may not be the only fact, but it's noting that, and in this case, interestingly, exterior siding is also a very predictive factor. You might say, well, if they have really flammable siding, that may be, and there may be other parameters or other aspects that also contribute. Year built is a challenging one. We couldn't remove it because it is a very important signal, but it's a confounding factor, right? After certain years, different fire codes were required. But there's also a change in construction over the years. And there's a degradation of buildings and change in landscaping over the years. So it's a confounding variable, but it's one that can't be excluded unless we had lots more information on the ground for the house. And then flame length is here. Flame length, of course, is very important because that talks about the fire exposure to the house, followed by embers. Pretty much embers were deposited everywhere. And so it's still important, but generally it becomes not on the top because most of the structures, even the ones that weren't burned down, got at least some exposure to embers. Then we see roof construction. Now, why wasn't roof construction near the top? Because we usually say fix your wood roof first. How many wood roof structures are still there? There aren't a lot. So it does show up. There are some wood roofs construction that burned down, but there's a very small number. Vent screens, vegetation separation, window panes, and eaves. Now I'm going to note something. We're going to go through and show you another way to look at vegetation separation that becomes very interesting in just a moment. But so this is when we stack the fires. I'm not going to spend time on it now. You're welcome to review the paper, but we look at it individually for each fire. Some fires, like the flame length, is slightly more important than separation in the Tubbs fire because of the layout. There are some homes that are more sparse, and those that didn't get impacted by the fire front at all obviously aren't going to be affected, and those that were in the way were. And so there are those nuances for each fire, but overall the trends pretty much remain the same. Just going to go a little fast because I know time's getting short. So we did another analysis that I think was really interesting and very impactful. We built a model. Why don't we take that model and say, what if we actually applied the mitigation we hoped we had, and then see how the losses would change? So we're starting at the very bottom of this the screen here. So we started off that the model predicted home loss by 82% accuracy just based on the limited parameters we had, which is considered pretty good. And on the right-hand side, you see in the light blue, the survived structures. Left-hand side, the dark blue destroyed. So with no mitigation, the base layer, we see 20% survived, 80% of the data set destroyed. If we had hardening only, without adjusting any defensible space, 25% survived. Why is it so low? Well, I wouldn't expect it just to begin with, but maybe that's right. Hardening without clearing defensible space may not be effective on its own. However, we see zone 0 only, and this is meaning every house in the community in the model adding it jumps from 20% to a 37% survival. That's a really big jump for just one measure. Now, vegetation separation wasn't huge when we went to the model fitting, right? But this is different. This is actually applying that to on the ground, assuming houses are spaced where they are, we can't move them, and we only make this change with those features, what would happen? And so I think that's a really interesting result. By the way, the zone 0 only wasn't in the paper, it was in the additional materials that we attached. But since January, zone 0 has become much more relevant, and so we've added it to this graph. If you add hardening, we get 40% survival, and then hardening and defensible space through zone 1, so that's basically your yard, you're now jumping from 20% to 48% survival. So suddenly it's 50-50 from 20%. And I think that
I'm sorry, what is
shows
the +1?
that means zone 0, the 5 feet, to zone 1, which goes out to 30 feet
Oh, zone 1.
of
That's
defensible space.
zone
So
1. I
that's just
gotcha.
saying
I
that you
gotcha.
do defensible space
I gotcha.
in
Zone,
your
it's
yard,
basically,
basically.
you're saying hardening plus zone 1.
Yeah. Yep.
All the way from the house to 30.
Hardening zone 0, zone
Gotcha.
1. We're not talking
Got
out
it.
to zone 2. We're just zone 1. So, but this is I think a very large benefit and something we're seeing now. It does not apply to just one home. In this case, we're showing because one home, every home is different because every surrounding home is different exposures and there's a different fit. If we do a whole community, though, if we pick a chunk and do it, we can see these benefits. And so I think this is a really powerful demonstration and one of the first few times that we've had some fact in this, that doing our mitigation can actually significantly change some of our outcomes. And now we can see just how much.
Okay.
And I caution that this is a static representation. It's not where we're modeling a fire. So if the fire came through and instead of igniting 20 homes, it ignited 3, the fire service is going to have a much easier time putting those 3 out. We can't account for that fact. We're only accounting for just the features. So if we cut the losses in half, would the firefighters get the upper hand? They might. That's not included here. So I think these reductions can have additional benefits that we're not even accounting for here. And these are things that we're going to continue to study in the modeling aspect, not just from the data, as we move forward. So, the big conclusion to me is that hardening and defensible space play really important roles in reducing the likelihood of structure ignition. There's clear mechanistic ways. And I think really what we want to do is we want to continue pushing for these mitigation measures. Now, also note, I have to do a little side note on zone 0 because I can't stop getting questions on that. I know it's very controversial in many ways. I did a literature review for the Board of Forestry, and I do think there's some broad evidence to support the effectiveness, this paper included, but also experiments in laboratories and with testing like at IBHS, as well as on the ground investigations. There are still some gaps, right? Like we don't know much about partial application. This study is saying if you clear it, it's a big effect. We don't know what if you only half clear it? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be reduced effect, but is it zero effect? Is there some, how much risk are you willing to accept? And there's also a lot of questions on ornamental vegetation. We know it burns, even wet vegetation burns at some point. But the specifics and the specific limits, that's not there for every piece. We only know what happens if we really clear things up. So I'll leave it at that. The paper is open access. All the data is open access and can be downloaded from the links, and I'll take questions if there's any.
Thank you so much, Michael. We have one from Carrie on the Berkeley website that they published a summary of your study. It stated that zone 0 implementation alone without home hardening resulted in only a 17% reduction in risk. Can you clarify?
It's it's all about how you do the numbers. So we're going from 20% to 37% survival. So that's where they got the number.
The
We went back
17.
and forth with the publication news team, and they decided they're like, no, this is really the best way to say this. We want to say this way, and that eventually we held back. So yeah, we've had that discussion, and also like with different news sources like SF Chronicle, like they're like, no, we think it's much better to say it this way. Like, please go ahead, just here's the facts, the numbers, here's the table. Um, I think the important point is that it is a strong influence. It's not
Yeah,
100%. It's not, it's not
yeah,
massive, but it is massive. It's one of the few things you can see that actually affect change.
yeah,
Hardening does too, especially particularly hardening coupled with the zone zero. We do see those big changes, but they have to be coupled together. And
yeah.
this all assumes we have the same exposure. This isn't accounting for the fact that we might actually work on the exposure. We might cut the weeds back and do other things that are going to reduce that. So there are ways to do much more reduction than what we see here. This is just what you can do with what we already have there.
Yeah. Well, I know you made a big splash. There was a lot of coverage of your piece, and we really appreciate you being here. We have one more question that I think we have time to answer. Are you able to extrapolate from the database to determine, for example, optimal distance for separation of structures? Let's just take that.
Okay. Yeah, from this data, no. This is very challenging. So I would say, so we've been sending members of the lab's IBHS last year and this year on two projects. One, we're measuring the emissions from structures. They're burning full ADUs,
Okay.
900 square foot homes,
Mm.
under wind, different 30 and 55-mile-an-hour winds, to a target structure. So we've been collecting emissions, heat fluxes, embers, you name it, we're collecting it. We're trying to get everything we can. And those are at different spacings. And it's really interesting. Optimal spacing depends. It does depend a bit on what the structures are made of, what the wind conditions are, the angle. There are influencers there. But I think when we talk about, Chapter 7A homes and 30 feet, this is around a good guideline. There are conditions where you can overpower that still, but not conditions we hope are going to be very common. Remember, we're trying to find all the ways to reduce spread through the community, not just as a single, but overall. We're reducing ignition, reducing the fires to get up and into the structures. Then we're reducing if a structure goes, does it get to the neighboring structure? So, you can always say, well, 40 feet's better, well, 50 feet's better. But I think at some point we have to draw a limit, and we had to say, well, this will prevent most of all problems. So 10 feet is definitely not good, and 20 feet can also be very problematic. 30 feet gets much better and much less likely. The results are being put together and will be submitted for publication, which is very nice. The current results they did a test. Someone mentioned the exterior buildings, so the sheds. They did these tests with sheds first, and that is under review right now. So I'm quite happy. So this work is not just coming out in a report, but will be in a peer-reviewed literature, hopefully, in the coming months.
Well, it's fascinating that you've been sending some of your team down to the IBHS facility and joining forces. That's great. One very teeny last question from Chief Tyler. Are you assessing exterior fire sprinklers as a mitigation factor?
No, we're not. It's not collected on DIN, and it is so rarely implemented. I mean, I can go on about exterior fire sprinklers, um, but I think everyone in the research field would say we really need more work on it, because there are anecdotes of it working and anecdotes of it not working.
Okay.
And the theory of suppressing embers is great, but that means you have to have 100% coverage at enough coverage to put out any potential embers from igniting,
Gotcha.
including every nook and cranny. under 70, 80, 90 mile an hour gusts. That's a really hard thing. And there was a thesis from a student in Australia. Getting water under those conditions to all surfaces is very hard. And so I look forward to there actually being more studies and results. Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. Everybody who joined us for today's wrap meeting, thank you so much. Thank you to my team, Emily Rogan, Ben Laterno, Annie Barber, Joel Boucher. It's just feels good in these crazy times to be with other people who are trying to problem solve. So thank you so much, Michael, for the research that you're doing. Claudia, for the work you did in the legislature. And I hope everybody will join us again on November 4th for the next wrap meeting. Until then, that's a wrap.